I'm Chris Richardson, and welcome to Capstone. I'm glad you're taking this course. If you are officially registered for Capstone this term, wonderful. Make sure you do all the activities, and I promise you'll be fine, even if it seems a little intimidating at first to think about all the things we're going to be doing in this class. I also want to say, if you've stumbled upon this video, if a friend sent it to you, or maybe you're interested in Capstone next year or something and you want to prepare a little bit, you're totally welcome to participate. I hope you do. And yeah, it can't hurt even if you're not an official student in this class. So enjoy, I hope, what you're about to partake in, because it will be rewarding, and I'm sure, I promise, you will get something out of this. That said, today, I just want to introduce what a capstone is. I want to talk about expectations, mine and yours, and I also want to do a couple activities that'll get you thinking about what we'll be doing for the rest of the term. So thank you for joining me, and again, welcome to Capstone. So let me talk a little bit about what a capstone actually is. You may not know this, or you may, but a capstone literally is the thing that goes on top of an arc. And so when you think about architecture, especially classical architecture, a lot of that was literally building arcs. So you might think of the Arc de Triomphe, or some of the more famous arcs that you can see in Paris and other cities. But a lot of entrances, a lot of famous buildings, a lot of just regular churches historically were using arcs, or you can think about them as arches too, I suppose. But anyway, the capstone is the thing that goes on top, and it goes on top and it holds the whole structure together. So without a good capstone, without the capstone in the right place, the thing falls apart. And historically, they say, I'm not sure how true this is, that the architect would have to prove him or herself by standing under the arc when the capstone's placed to make sure that they did it properly. They have to be very confident. If they're not, then the whole thing could crash on them and they could die, which is probably not great, and that is not going to happen to you in this class. But that's where the idea of a capstone comes in. It's like the final piece once you know that you're a professional. And so you will be, by the end of all of this, a professional in communication studies. You've already taken intro classes, you've done things like theory class and methods class. You've probably had some classes with me, like intro to media, pop culture and cultural theory. Maybe you took cinematic analysis and film theory with me, or courses like that. Either way, you've built up the basics, and now we're just going to put it together. So metaphorically, you're going to be putting that capstone on and standing under it. In reality, what you're going to be doing is thinking of some good questions, thinking of some good theoretical frameworks, methodologies, and putting that all together and actually building something new, which for most of us will probably be about a 20-page essay, and we'll talk about details as we go. So don't freak out, don't worry about it. I know a lot of people think capstone is super scary, and a 20-page essay might be super scary, but we're gonna break it down into really kind of simple parts. I think you'll be surprised how simple this whole process is if you break it down. So, like I said, we'll have one-on-one time where we can talk about our individual projects, but for these videos, I want you to participate. I encourage you, if you're watching on YouTube, to do comment below when I ask for information or for ideas, or to just give feedback. But I definitely encourage you, if you are a registered student, to fill in the forms that I have on the website, because I'll use those for participation. And we can talk more about detail later, but I just want to get us started thinking about capstone. So if a capstone is that chunk that brings everything together and that holds a solid foundation together, then what will you be doing and how will you be doing it? Maybe you've thought about that already and maybe you haven't. Totally okay, either one. Let's start. The first activity I'm going to ask you to do is to write down some ideas. And so I want you to think about big picture ideas, like what are you interested in general? Maybe you're interested in music, maybe you're interested in video, maybe film, video games, comic books, journalism, whatever it is that you're most interested in. Start big picture, so say maybe popular culture, and then narrow it down a little bit and say, well, out of all the stuff in popular culture, I think music is the most important to me. Out of all the music in popular culture, I think maybe hip hop is the most important to me. Now that I think about it, I have a lot of really strong opinions on Kanye's latest work. And so That's what I mean by narrowing it down. You are not married to this idea. You do not have to follow through with this, but I want you to start thinking about what are the big picture communication studies issues that you're interested in, and then if you had to narrow it down, what would that be? So maybe you start off by thinking, I like playing video games. I've been interested in sort of the gender dynamic in video games lately. I know the newest Last of Us has recently come out, and it has a female protagonist who's powerful, but also, I guess you could argue, weak in certain ways. I haven't finished playing the game, but there's a whole bunch of arguments to be made about characters in video games, and then you can maybe go down to, I don't know if you can hear my dog barking, he gets really excited about this stuff. That's Rupert. You might want to go down to a very fine level, like this character in this video game represents this, and that's why I want to study it. Or maybe you just think like, okay, I'm interested in video games, I'm interested in first-person shooters, maybe I can look at a big picture, take a bunch of those. So I'm going to pause it, and what I mean by pause it is I'm going to show this little sign that you should see, hopefully, and during that, I want you to pause the video and ask yourself, what are my interests going from big picture to more narrow, and I would encourage you to spend like at least 5 minutes. If you want, get away from your computer and write this down for yourself, then send it maybe, or send it right in your comments section. All of that's totally fine. Think about it. I'm going to just pause it for a second, but I want you to pause it for longer. All right, you've thought about that. I've collected, I thought it was Rupert barking, but it was Eddie. He's going to be quiet, and he's going to be a very good boy. I'm going to take his collar off so he doesn't make much noise. Okay, so you've thought about the big picture stuff. You've narrowed it down a little bit. You can do this as many times as you want. So if you narrowed it down and you, got yourself into some kind of music genre that later you're thinking, I just don't want to spend another 2 months, 3 months studying this, totally fine. But that process that we just did, thinking sort of big picture and narrowing it down a little bit, is a very good first step. Now your next assignment that I want you to do right now, right after I show you this sign that I think I'm going to put on this corner. I might put it on that corner, so I'm not sure yet. It's all new. Anyway, same kind of thing, but I want you to think a little bit about the theories that you've learned over your years as a comm studies student. So, you know I'm partial to Foucault, critical discourse analysis. I like Marshall McLuhan's work. I also like sort of, I guess it could be broadly cultural studies, Stuart Hall, a number of people, Donna Haraway. We've, in my classes, talked about a number of things, but also I'm sure in your other classes you've talked about a number of things. If it's foggy, if you're getting back to school after a summer of chaos, what have you, totally fine. Look up some of this stuff. Look at your old books, look at your old notes, look at your old essays. But I want you to do the same thing and think about the task of studying whatever it is that you're most interested in. So like I said, maybe you're really interested in The Last of Us, the video game. Maybe you're not, and that's fine. That's how you pick another example. But think about what would you use theoretically to start analyzing that. Would you maybe look at Stuart Hall's encoding and decoding model? Would you look at the sort of materiality of the medium itself? Maybe think about McLuhan. Would you look at the gender dynamics that are at play? I like Trisha DeLauretis. I like a number of other scholars. Toro Moy is a really great. Judith Butler is also a really great scholar who talks about gender. You could use any of them to start thinking about how gender plays a role in that video game. And anyway, pause it in a moment. Ask yourself what theoretical ideas, doesn't have to be well constructed at this point, but what theories might I apply to the thing that I'm interested in? And again, do this, you pause it, you either do it on your computer, you put it in the notes, you share it with people, write it down on a piece of paper and then look at it later, and that gives you like a second processing time that you can use. But think about that. So if you wanted to narrow in on something, say maybe, animal communication or something, you want to think about how you could study that using any of the readings, any of the theories that you've done over the last few years. Go for it. You're almost done your first lesson. I know it didn't maybe seem like a lesson, and there's lots more we're going to talk about, but I want you to think about those two questions so far and how you might start to answer them. And then the final thing I want you to do, and this is your homework for the week, I want you to send this to me by the end of the week, but write down whatever you're thinking, whatever questions you think peers might be able to help you with. Message me if you'd like. But your final question is, once you have a basic idea of what you might want to study, once you have a basic idea of a theoretical framework you might want to use, I want you to look for anything that might have been written about those two things. And in that case, you might want to move up in terms of your specificity. So if you started thinking, I like popular culture, I like video games, I like first-person shooters, and I like the idea of studying gender in this particular game, when you look for articles, whether that's through the databases, Google Scholar, even just a Google search at the very beginning, although we can talk about the pros and cons, eventually you want to stumble upon some quality scholarship that's written as a peer-reviewed source, whether that's in a journal, a professional scholarly journal, university press, or something comparable. What can you find that might have been written about that? Again, you might not be able to find something that uses Judith Butler applied to the most recent Last of Us game, because that's probably not in existence, although if it is, please send it to me because I'd love to read that. But you might think, okay, well, that specifically I can't find wherever I look, but I can find some things on gender in video games. That's a good start. Start collecting that. Start saving that. Maybe you can find some stuff not on gender in video games, but on gender and music, but they're very similar in the sense that they're asking audiences how they relate to the people, and therefore they're asking questions that you also might want to ask in your research. So that's a good study habit, is to start thinking big picture and narrowing it down, but then also to go up and down that list and look for sources. And I don't want to freak you out. I know in some of these classes, people say you have to get 50, 100 scholarly reviewed or peer-reviewed sources, and you have to make a list of that. In my experience, just making a list of 100 scholarly sources is going to prevent you from actually reading those sources, because then all you care about is this big list. We're not going to do that. I'll tell you more later about what we're actually going to do, but for now, just collect stuff, see what's out there. That's the last thing I want you to do this week. And again, maybe you start thinking about a specific theory, specific object of study, and then you realize later on, I don't want to spend my time doing this. Or I started thinking about gender, but I realized race is a lot more important to consider, especially right now, and so I'd like to change that up a little bit. Totally fine. Look back at the work you've done as a student. Look back at the things that you've been reading lately, whether or not that was for class, and then ask yourself, what might I want to study? How might I want to study it? What theoretical framework might I want to use? And then just start searching for stuff. And another great way to do that is you find one article that's really powerful, or you find one book that's really powerful, and I think you can predict what I'm going to say, I hope. Just look at the back of that book. There should be works cited. There should be other sources, and then you just follow that trail. It's like breadcrumbs that you can continue to follow and find your way to more and more meaningful research, and perhaps more and more specific research that you didn't know existed before. So don't freak out. Don't start thinking you need 100 sources or 1,000 sources or whatever it is. I mean, this is an undergraduate class. I want to know by the end of the capstone that you've done due diligence, that you've looked for the important work that's out there, that you've thought critically about it. And we're going to talk about how to do everything. All I want you to do now is think about what might you want to study, how might you want to study it, and figure out just what's out there. Of course, it's good to read these things too, but even just for this week, collect. Don't worry about reading. Read if you have time, read if you can, but we'll worry more about that later. For now, I want you to be excited because you're going to be studying something that's super cool, that you care about deeply, hopefully relates to communication studies. You're going to be doing it in a rigorous way that shows that you know not only that this thing exists, but that there are theoretical frameworks that can help you think about this thing, and that you can share with other people once you've thought about it, and that will, I hate to use the word enlighten, but I think that's what we're doing, right? We're making things more enlightening for people so that if they play that game, if they listen to that song, if they read that book, they'll have a deeper understanding of what's going on and the implications and the issues at stake, more so than they would without having read your work. And that's ultimately what you're going to be doing. And if that sounds imposing and scary, that's normal. That's absolutely to be expected. By the end of this, I think you'll be surprised at how easy it was once you broke it down, once you started to do the research. So, congratulations on making it through your first week's video for Capstone. I don't care whether you're in this class or not. If you're watching this video, post some comments. Maybe share this if you know people who might want to be doing something like this. And yeah, take some time. Step away from the video, step away from your computer, come back to it later and share your list, share your ideas, and share the research that you found. So for the last step, once you have collected some stuff, share the best of it with me and with others, however you want to do that. If you are registered officially for this class, make sure you submit it the proper way through the channel. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next week, and I look forward to getting to know you and your projects even more. Until next time, cheers.